Hello and welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe, and joining us for the final, LaVar's final appearance on Post Sports Live, the short-timer office linebacker, LaVar Arrington.
Hello.
Mike Wise in the house, and Dan Steinberg as well from the Sports Blog. We'll get to your send-off later. Congratulations on the deal with NFL Network off the top, the news that broke last week. So we'll get to some of that and final thoughts from you later in the show. But first, we're going to start with NBA free agency. We've got a lot to talk about there. We'll get your guys' reaction to the LeBron James news. We'll talk about the balance of power in the East. And then we'll get to the Wizards and their free agency, bringing in Paul Pierce, and whether or not that makes them a better team or more likely to make a deeper run in the playoffs next year in your guys' minds. And we'll get to the Kevin Durant rumors because, hey, it's going to be fun to play that game for the next 2 years, so why not start now? And we'll get to the Nationals at the All-Star break. They're in first place. Get your thoughts on the first half MVP, who will be the second half MVP, and then pitching staff will have some questions there. Get to the Capitals. We were off last week on vacation, did not have a chance to weigh in on Capitals free agent signings. Get your guys' grade for that. And finally, we'll wrap up with some bold predictions for Redskins training camp, which opens in less than 2 weeks, next Thursday. All right, let's start off with LeBron James, the sports world, all still reacting to his decision to go home, the Sports Illustrated article. And I wanted to start this segment by comparing the different treatments of LeBron and the news. On the left, you have the Cleveland Plain Dealer and LeBron doing his whole chalk thing. On the right, you've got him leaving, and that's from the Miami Herald. And in the middle, you've got the New York Times agate, very bold agate front sports page on Saturday. Dan, your reaction to the treatments from the different newspapers with the LeBron James news?
You know, I'm not a newspaper designer. I didn't like the New York Times one at all. And if I was a print subscriber and I received that, I would want to know, hey, where's the other 80% of this page that I paid for? I don't really understand the point that they're making. I guess it was something about when something is so big and so hyped, you have to, whistle it down, pare it down to the. I don't understand it exactly. I read the story of how the Cleveland Plain Dealer one was created, and it was really, really interesting. And they had been planning it in great detail and depth for days and days and days.
Right, special section.
And then they had an artist who had commissioned that drawing from an artist 3 or 4 days before the paper actually came out. And it's really interesting to see what it was like in Northeast Ohio and what happened to that community in the days. And they said that when they were putting that section out, they had to change it so many times because people kept calling to put more and more ads into the paper that finally they said, we can't take any more ads. We have to actually put out a newspaper. So I like that one the best.
So whatever the ads were that they didn't take, the New York Times could have put them on their cover. Look, Jason Stallman is the New York Times sports editor now. I didn't work with him. I've met him a couple times. He's obviously a brilliant young mind. He probably okayed this. It looks like two papers, two are from 2014 and one is from 1898. and sometimes you want to be so futuristic and so modern and we want to overthink things so much that the smartest guys in the room really aren't journalists. They're the photographers who take cool pictures or the artists who make. The whole idea is you want to hook into the newspaper. That's what, anytime I wrote a story, they said, well, we're going to give you a nice headline so we can hook people into your story, or we're going to give you a nice picture so we can. That was not a hook. That was, as he said, it's sort of wasted space.
I'm surprised you guys are taking that approach. I
I
thought that you guys would have liked it.
2 of those papers I want to pick up, and one of them I don't.
Yeah, one of them.
LaVar, do you agree?
I thought it was brilliant.
LaVar thinks the opposite. Okay, you
I
like
thought
it.
it was brilliant.
And he's the one going on to the next job. So
What does that tell us?
The reason being is because it's shock value.
Yeah. We're talking about
it's a major publication in the largest media market in the country, and it's almost blank. So it almost forces you to look like everybody said, what the, everybody's like, what the.
So I'm an ego-driven writer. I'm like, why? Where the hell is my story?
Why
didn't they put this on the front page? But I know what you're saying. I just don't.
There is shock value.
It's such a big story. It was such a big story that to minimize the size of it on the page, the front page like that, or whatever page it was on, it just, for me, if that's the front page, I think it's brilliant because everybody looks to see, in the sports, everybody looks to see the headlines, where is everything at, and this and that, and LeBron James drowned every piece of news, everything out with his decision. I think is pretty
It's a unique
brilliant.
approach. It was inspired by, I think, what the New York Post did for Kanye West and Kim Kardashian's wedding.
I go back to when, I don't know if
That's the second buzzer, so
Dan
make
was
it
ever an agate clerk, but when we started our careers, people called in softball scores, and this is what the print you write it in, and it's sort of like, okay, the agate clerk should be getting a lot of money for that.
Well, you could, if you wanted to nitpick, you could nitpick that they actually didn't sign him yet, and there's actually an error there. But who's nitpicking? All right, let's move on to the balance of power in the East, guys. And LaVar, I'll start with you. What does this signing do? Is Cleveland instantly the favorites in the East as a result?
I don't think that necessarily makes them instantly the favorite in the East, but I mean, he's the best player on the planet, as everybody mentions. So it's a great young team, but it's still an unproven team. You got guys that are just drafted, with Wiggins and things like that. Wiggins could come out and be an amazing star for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They had Mayo, not Mayo, who? Kyrie Irving. I meant to say. They have a lot of pieces in place, and if they were to get Kevin Love in a trade, I really think it makes them a very strong team. But I really look at two teams in particular, really three in a way. I know it might sound strange, but I look at the Wizards as a team that are in contention this year if they can stay healthy. If Nene can stay healthy,
In contention, but not over Cleveland at this point.
I'm not necessarily.
You think so?
Yes,
Okay.
because I think that the backcourt play will drastically improve from this past year to next year with Bill and Wall. I really believe that. I think their learning curve is probably closed in and probably shut down by now. So now it's just play to win. I look at Atlanta. I think that they'll be a better team getting Horford back. They did very well, and they didn't have one of their best players on the team. Right. And then I still say, as much as people make it out to be of the collapse and the failing of Indiana this past year, I still think that they are probably the front runner of all three of those teams.
So Indiana would still be your favorite in the East.
Yes.
Mike, how do you?
Piggybacking off what LaVar said, I think what LeBron James going back to Cleveland did was make somebody like Larry Bird's job easier. They don't have to completely back up the truck with that team anymore. That team was 2 games from going to the NBA Finals. They had a lot of positives, even though they fell on their face and Hibbert couldn't get a rebound or a point a couple times in the playoffs. So as bad as Indiana was, I would make them the front runner. Any team that LeBron James went to was going to be a playoff
contender,
team. A playoff team. Yep. I don't know. I wouldn't say contender.
Really?
I would say if any GM in the league would take the Wizards 5 over Cleveland Cavaliers 5 right now, believe it or not. But
I would agree with
that. But the big quotient is, okay, if they have Kevin Love, that's game over.
Love's
you could
a game
probably
changer.
win.
They're instantly the favorites with Love,
Neither
right?
Kyrie Irving nor Kevin Love has won a playoff game yet, but you got to think LeBron James would help them.
Give me an extra. We'll add some time to this, Dan. I'd love to hear your
No,
thoughts.
I'm surprised that you guys say that, because to me, you look what happened when LeBron left that team. I think they dropped like 42 wins or something like that from one season to the next, and they were, the Cavs were in the NBA Finals with him, and they weren't. Obviously the roster was a little bit different than it is now, but it wasn't like stacked with pieces around him. He dragged that team to the finals, and I don't see how I would bet against him right now. I think the one team that neither of you guys mentioned was the Bulls, and so much of that depends on Derrick Rose.
How about the Heat with
Pau
Deng?
Gasol just
the
signed
Heat with Deng are still going to be
the Heat are
in the mix.
And here's the funny thing is Indiana was built to compete against Bosh, Wade, and LeBron. You don't have to deal with that anymore. You don't have to deal with Ray Allen being that clutch shooter for them. You don't have to deal with what you had to deal with the Miami Heat. You take away the coaching, you take away the management. We don't know how Cleveland is ran. We don't know how they're coached.
Well, their coach is first-year guy.
And so there are a lot of question marks surrounding what seemed or appeared to be, maybe not as shiny a situation as it could be. Maybe we underestimate how much Eric Spoelstra and the relationship there may have been, and Pat Riley and what he's able to do. I think there's a lot to be said about that, and we'll find out.
Indiana, Chicago, the Wizards, Cleveland,
Wow, Cleveland is
Toronto.
It basically says that the East is why anybody's
Brooklyn,
a favorite. In
yeah,
the East.
exactly.
If I had to pick one team, I'd take Cleveland.
I would
for sure.
too. I'm with you on that. I think it's evenly split here. All right.
I just don't want to go to Cleveland for the playoffs.
Let's turn our attention, guys, to the Wizards here. And I want to ask a simple question. The Wizards lost Ariza. We thought that there was about a 50-50 chance they'd be able to bring him back. He basically signed the same deal with Houston that was offered to him in Washington, but obviously because of tax implications, he'll be able to make that money or save a lot more money in Texas. Are the Wizards better now, Mike, with Paul Pierce than they were last year with Ariza?
No. And I would take. I really want the Paul Pierce signing to work out. I really do. And but I think. And I don't think it's Mitch Richmond coming in from Sacramento and falling apart. I do think he gives him big minutes.
He'll be 37
But he's 37 years old. He had his worst year from the field last year, his worst production point-wise. I think this is a guy, he's clearly on the downside of his career. It's just a matter of how many more points and minutes he can give you. If you ask the Wizards deep inside whether they would take Ariza for 4 or Paul Pierce for 2, they would have said Ariza for 4. So this is a nice safe face move, but they didn't get the girl they really wanted to bring to the junior prom.
Dan, do you agree?
I don't disagree with anything he said there, except for the first thing, which is I still think that they're better this year, and that's because of what LaVar said earlier. I just can't imagine a scenario in which Beal and Wall aren't better this year than they were last year, and to such a degree, I would think that it makes up for that decline.
Can I clarify that 1 minute? I meant
Specific comparison.
specific comparison.
I totally
player to
I
player.
think with Ariza, they would have been better this year than with Pierce.
That's fair. I guess that's fair. I think the thing with Ariza versus Pierce, to me, the biggest difference is the defensive stuff. Ariza was such a great defender for them last year, and Pierce, probably never has been a great defender, but at this point in his career, he certainly isn't. And so, to me, that's the biggest.
What do you think,
You
LaVar?
couldn't pay Ariza a penny more than what you were offering him first and foremost. So the fact of the matter is, when you look at if Ariza was signed, Ariza would play a whole lot more than what I anticipate Paul Pierce playing. That's first and foremost.
We should open the door for more time for.
There you go. You don't want to retard the growth of a high draft pick in Otto Porter. That's the deciding factor here. It's not so much as Paul Pierce making this team better than what Ariza did. Is Otto Porter going to be able to come into position and make this team better than what Trevor Ariza did while he was playing? That, I think, is what the Washington Wizards brass are probably leaning on. So I would say they are probably better. From what I'm hearing out of summer camp, Otto Porter is showing signs of playing really well.
The night before.
So if that's the case, then now you're talking about a young, confident player that now adds to Bradley Beal and John Wall in that backcourt. I think it makes them better.
Yeah,
he's still here.
He had a back issue already, and
It'll be a couple months.
What are you going to do with that?
That's a good question. Once he gets healthy,
you're starting the season almost certainly without Webster or Ariza, and with who knows what the starting lineup will look like exactly.
You gotta hope that if you have to start Paul Pierce immediately, that Otto Porter can still play more minutes than Paul Pierce.
And Porter, one of the big strengths of his coming out of Georgetown was his defense. So maybe that can help shut down on the defensive side, step in for Ariza. All right, let me ask you guys about the we started with LeBron and coming home to Cleveland. The new sort of fancy rumor around D.C. at least is Kevin Durant, obviously his local ties from this area. And the likelihood of his potential return in a couple years and what the Pierce signing means to that, and Nene and his contract in a couple years. Dan, do you want to talk about your story from this morning, but also the odds? Let me just ask you the odds, what you think the odds are of Kevin Durant ever playing in a Washington Wizards uniform?
Ever or starting in 2016?
Either one.
To me, it's like 25%, 33%, something like that.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it's hard for me to really have a lot of faith in it just because we haven't seen free agents in the prime of their career come to the Washington Wizards like ever, basically, at least for decades and decades. But he talks about this area constantly. He talks about his family constantly. He talks about Prince George's County constantly. He obviously is a really thoughtful, considerate guy who I'm sure his legacy is the same way with LeBron. It's something that he thinks about. I mean, he is a folk hero in Oklahoma City, but not to the extent that he would be here, I don't think, if he wins a championship.
He's a legend here. He's like on Len Bias's level here.
He's like Elgin Baylor. He's the new Elgin Baylor of today, where people talked about Elgin back in the day. This is Kevin Durant in D.C.
I say it's a 50-50 chance.
50-50.
I say it's 50-50 for all the reasons that Dan mentioned. He's a bright young man.
Mm-hmm.
I've had an opportunity to get to know him through the years. He is thoughtful. He does understand what he's doing. He understands exactly what he's doing. His mother understands what they are doing as a family unit. I think not only does he realize that he can come here and be that figure that LeBron is to Ohio, but you got to also take into consideration it's even bigger than what LeBron is doing, because he will have now effectively been the one who made Washington, D.C. a team that can be a destination for major free agents to come to.
I think this is the big thing, and I agree with LaVar. 2 weeks ago, I wrote, "This is not a pipe dream." That Kevin Durant actually could wind up in Washington one day. And I said about what Dan was, it's about a 20% chance now. We just came off a free agent period that's not done yet, but in which Paul Pierce selected this team over several other teams.
Yeah. Right.
They weren't going to pay him that kind of money, but the idea that Paul Pierce thought that he could get the most out of his career at this stage with this team, I think says a lot. It's going to be up to this team, really. And if they show that they're the new hot young team in the NBA that needs that one extra step to get to the top, Kevin Durant is going to say, you know what, New York looked great, the Nets look great, Jay-Z, my agent, would love to take me to Brooklyn and be on the corner with Russell Simmons and the gang. But you know what? Washington, D.C. is now a free agent destination, and I think that could definitely happen in the next 2 years.
So what percentage?
And I say 50-50.
You say 50-50
I say
also?
50-50 as well.
This is, I don't know how much of this is done by Nike and how much by Durant, but 2 years in a row he's released his new KD shoe in the D.C. area. Last year he did it in Suitland. This year he did it at the museum downtown. I mean, obviously this area means
that's
something.
That's got to be his call,
He's
right?
a big Redskins fan. He's
Oh,
just
yeah.
a big Washington fan.
Maybe the third one will be released at the new Post
Do you think we could do
destination.
like a percentages every week on Post Sports Live going forward? The percentages of
No,
Durant
let's just kneel and beg him to come.
Pretty serious.
Maybe he'll watch this.
I will start wearing 5 jerseys on the show. I don't care. I'll go all in.
I can't think of an athlete that would be a bigger deal coming to Washington in any sport than him right now.
He would. I hate to say it. He would make Robert Griffin III almost irrelevant,
that would make for some great tiebreaker
unless
debates.
RG3 took Washington to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a good. Oh man, can you imagine? All right.
I mean, it would
let's
be
move
bigger
on.
than LeBron and Manziel. That's for certain.
Let's move on to Let's move on to the Nationals, guys. They got to win. They still got to win. Let's move on to the Nats. All right, it's All-Star break. I know. Look at this. Everybody's getting excited. LaVar's last show. All right. Who is?
Finally, we get him out of time.
They're in first place. I think I read some stats somewhere that 70% of teams at first place that are in first place in their division at the All-Star break make the playoffs. Nationals obviously in a race with Atlanta, but otherwise it's sort of a two-horse race in the National League East. According to Baseball Prospectus, they have an 80% chance of making the postseason. Anyway, who's your first half MVP and who will the second half MVP be for the Nats, Dan? Let's make this quick so we can get to a couple questions.
I'm going to take what I think is the easy answer and say Rendon.
Yep.
Didn't make it to the All-Star game, but what he did with his bat, he started off so hot. Obviously, he had a little bit of a dip there, but I mean, a great bat when so many of the bats were out of the lineup. The way that he can switch between second base and third base really has opened up so many options with the Zimmerman thing that would not have been there if he couldn't switch so easily. And he's also been outstanding defensively.
And played great defensively regardless of what his
I mean, he's made several outstanding plays at third base. He's a guy that you didn't know exactly what you were getting from when you drafted him. He's obviously a few spots lower than he was projected to go. But I think that you could argue for LaRoche, you could argue for a couple of the pitchers, but to me it's Rendon.
I'd say LaRoche because I just think that he's a guy that still keeps that locker room together when things feel like they're splintering, and he's still more productive than people thought he'd be at this age, and people worried that they were paying him too much for that position. They may be, but he's worth it.
Certainly more productive than he was last year.
I'm going Rendon as well. I mean, I would, for the sake of argument, I would try to come up with a different name, but he was deserving of making it to the All-Star game. His numbers don't lie. We talked about the numbers on the last show, and there's a lot of high-profile guys at that first base position that got the vote, but I think it's clearly Rendon for the first half.
The team has the best ERA in the majors. I'm going to throw my vote for the first half MVP to sort of an unsung hero on the pitching staff, Doug Fister. The number 4 or 5 guy, 8-2.
I
know wins don't say everything, but 2.9 ERA.
It's every 5 days.
Roark and Fister together. So give me a Roark Fister combined.
Okay, I'll give you a Roark Fister combined.
That's what I'll say for our first
also make an argument for Soriano. Honestly,
Yep,
I think James Wagner made a nice argument for why Soriano probably deserved one of the closer spots on the All-Star game. He obviously is not there either, and he wanted to go home to the Dominican Republic. So then he took himself out of the equation for a fill-in spot, but he's been outstanding, and his numbers compare with like Kimbrel, who is considered the best closer in the National League.
Give me your second half. Who's second half MVP, or who's going to be the most important player if you had to name one for the Nationals to win the division in the second half?
I'm going to just go to second half MVP, and I think again the obvious choice is Bryce Harper. He came back. Well, that's fine. He came back.
That's the obvious choice.
Well, it's like the easy answer. He came back slow, and so he hasn't really offered them that much offensively since he returned. But with the amount of expectations and potential that he had going into this season, if he can just get back to any semblance of that, I think it would be just a huge boost. But I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, I'll say Strasburg because I think, and I'm going to put these guys in the same boat in a way because I feel like, I was critical. Everybody's critical of Bryce Harper recently, and there's no question he's made some knuckleheaded moves with statements and whatnot like that. But this is still a guy who it still feels like when he's healthy a once-in-a-generation position player. And Strasburg feels like he's a once-in-a-generation pitcher when he's really on. I just wish these guys would play with some joy. I don't see any joy in there. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not around the clubhouse. Like Kilgore and those guys.
gives you a little bit of that.
Yeah, I did. Rendon, Desmond, all those guys.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like the young guys they should be boyishly exuberant like Magic Johnson every day, but I just feel like they should smile a little more. They're playing a kid's game for a living.
LaVar, who's your second half?
With Worth. I think Worth is clearly the MVP. He's going to be the MVP of the second half of the season. I think he's the leader. He has emerged as the leader in that clubhouse. I think that Bryce Harper has been the catalyst for whatever reason to him heating up with the offense of his game. But these guys really feed off of Jason Worth, and I think that in a lot of ways he's kind of evenly or quietly the driving force of this entire team. I think it comes out in the second half of the season. I think he proved out in the playoffs last year. I think that he'll do it in the second half this year.
Quick last question, and add a minute if you could, Jane. Thank you. Do you guys expect this to be nip and tuck all the way to the end between the Nats and Braves, or do you expect the Nats or Braves to sort of win comfortably in the division?
Yes, nip and tuck the whole way, but I think that both will have kind of cemented at least wild card spots, so there won't be quite as much pressure.
Yeah, if the Nationals remain healthy, I think they take the division easily.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
That's what I
I think they're in a position right now where if they stay healthy. And the second half MVP, if I had to throw one out there, Wilson Ramos. If he stays healthy, and that's power.
That's a big if.
I know it's a big if, but if they can stay healthy, especially in that rotation, then I do think they have a good chance of winning comfortably in the division.
And if they're in the playoffs in October with the Caps starting with a new head coach and the Wizards starting after one of their best seasons in 20 years, it's going to be a pretty exciting month. Plus the Redskins, obviously.
Plus the Redskins. They're an afterthought. Since when was that ever a case on this show? All right.
You must be a personality
We're going to
guy.
segue to the Caps, guys,
okay.
and we didn't have a chance to get the free agent grades. LaVar, we'll start with you on Caps. What overall grade would you give for the Capitals, who are the highest spenders in the NHL in free agency?
It's really difficult to say from my perspective. I will say that they did address the needs that they had to. They got defensive men, and which, in my opinion, everybody talked about how this team is so strong outside, but inside they're not, and they've needed teams that win build from the inside out, and it doesn't seem like that's what's taking place with the Caps. So they addressed a clear need, and with their new head coach, with the way his coaching reputation is, it sounds as though he may be able to get the most out of the guys that they've added. So it's a wait and see approach, but since I don't really know how that's going to pan out based off of so many moving pieces with a new GM, a new head coach, I'd say a B.
B?
Yeah, sure.
Mike, what do you think?
I'll say B+. And I know that's not in line with a lot of the Stanley Cup. A lot of the people in hockey think that the Orpik thing was a disaster.
Right, that they overpaid.
Yeah, overpaid and
too many years. Sure.
And what I liked about it, and in a weird way, George McPhee's got to be sitting around going, why didn't we spend this money in the offseason when I was here?
Right.
But I feel like this is the kind of the one thing that's been lacking from this team every postseason that I've seen it is just another level of grit, another brand of toughness. And when you have that guy in the crease that can knock a goal in, like if they would have got Knuble 5 years before they got him, or somebody like that, or Jason Arnott 5 years before they got him, like that guy. I don't know if our Orpik is that guy, but I do know that he's a defenseman that's a defensive defenseman, and that's important. You don't need an offensive defenseman like Mike Green anymore.
Yeah, you can't deny that the defense is better. The question is, did they spend too much for it? Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, and those guys were two of the defensive stalwarts for a Pittsburgh team that has been disappointing a couple years in a row in the playoffs. So, just having those guys is not any kind of guarantee for going far in the playoffs.
But they don't have an Ovechkin to go with them.
Well, they've got a Crosby and a Malkin.
Crosby, they got a Malkin, but Crosby can't seem to stay healthy.
I would say B-, and I think that you can be happy with what these pieces mean for 2014, but you have to. When you're grading for agency, you have to think about what it means in 2016, 2017. Paul Pierce is great for 2 years. Would he be great for 4 years? Probably not. And this Orpik, he seems to have been.
But you can play older in hockey.
You can. You're right, and he's younger than Pierce, but he seems to have already been in decline. And I don't think you can assess.
Whatever happened with Grabowski? What did they do with him?
Well, they still need a second center. That's one of the questions.
He's in Long Island.
He went somewhere else.
Long Island, the Islanders.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying all they talked about was a second line center that they needed him forever.
And shoring up the
defense.
the
moment they had a chance to resign him, they didn't resign him.
Well, they didn't have any money to.
Right.
They spent it all in Pittsburgh.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll watch that. Obviously, it can't have been too much of a surprise with Trotz, like you said, the defensive-minded coach bringing in the defense. Yeah. Not that it was his decision, and McClellan too. All right. This is your last show, LaVar. Let's get to your bold predictions on the Redskins. We would be remiss not to have your thoughts. I'm trying to make sure
this last show never ends. But
would be remiss not to ask you about some questions about the Redskins going into training camp next week. Give me a bold prediction or two on the state of the team and for next year specifically.
I just think the bold prediction would certainly have to be. I think there'll be a few bold predictions. I think that they'll be competitive in the NFC East for obvious reasons. I think that RG3 will have reestablished himself this season, but I just don't know that you can expect too much. I really don't. If Gruden starts off fast, it'd be no different than what happened with Jim Zorn. So again, when it comes down to the Washington Redskins, it's a wait and see approach. You can't really pinpoint what you may suspect the team to do, because really, in theory, if you look at the history of the team, it's a repeating history. So if you wanted to make a bold prediction, the bold prediction would be that they're going to do the same exact thing that they've done, in the last
6-7 wins,
10,
something
10
like
years.
that. 8 wins?
The boldest prediction would be it will be the same team that it's been, because that's what history says it's going to be.
I'm not going to say
LaVar
that.
leaves with sunshine.
Yeah. What would?
All right, that's fine.
Isn't that fair?
That's totally fair.
Are you going to get to the NFL Network and just dog them every day?
No, I don't dog them. I'll tell you what I will be able to do going to the NFL Network is actually show you why I feel the way that I feel, which is going to be pretty cool, because so many times we have the conversations and they have to hear us talk about the team in the way that we do, but then you're never really able, we don't show examples. Yeah. There aren't examples of why we're saying what we're saying. You just have to take our word out, what it is that we're saying. But now I have a whole bunch of people. I'll be in the office, and you pull this clip, you pull that clip, you pull this clip, you pull that clip, and then you walk through those clips, and then you show exactly why. It's not even an argument. You just show simple things as to, if you can't do the little things correctly, it ultimately leads to big things not going the way that they should. So I hope and anticipate that they'll do they'll do pretty good this year. But it's a new coach. It's their chance of doing well is really hinging on what Philly is able to do, and if the Giants are able to bounce back after a horrific season. And if you ask me, which one do you have to say you'd have more confidence in who can do what, I'm not sold on the Eagles hype. I'm not at all. I'm not sold on the Eagles hype. But the track record of the New York Giants says that they can fix what is broken within their team. So I would expect them to be a better team this year. So it would, to me, right now, you're looking at probably a two-man race, a two-team race right now in July between Philly and New York, if you ask me.
Okay.
8-8.
8-8.
That's
a huge improvement. That would be
Jay Gruden's rookie year.
And you're in the mix for the playoffs.
And I love Jay Gruden because he's like that guy in Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman character. He says, the Pacific has no memory of the future and no memory of the past. This guy's in the present. I like Jay Gruden.
All right, well, this show is going a little long, like Dan mentioned already. But
Way too long.
What the hell? It's LaVar's last show, right?
Last show.
Before we get to the montage from a compilation of some of your moments, I wanted to bring up a couple of pictures to show and illustrate just how far we've come here on Post Sports Live. We used to, do you remember when you first started with us, when we had the black box studio, and it was called Football Insider Live.
Oh, and you had Mace
and we had Rick Mace looking really interested there in the conversation, and we were all huddled around that little table.
And
Dan, you remember those?
Doing his usual thing.
And you could barely see you because you're like a floating head in that black outfit.
Oh,
and
now now this is just like the futuristic.
It's an upgrade.
We're just fly now.
It's an upgrade. And then there was do you remember the day you wore green pants?
Yes.
And if you look closely there, that's a green screen.
That's true.
You can kind of see through like a ghost there.
You weren't in shape either. Look at you.
That's fat.
He was showing the guns
really
there.
Fat right there.
So anyway,
my gun was out, but my belly was too.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the montage, then we'll come back with final thoughts. Hello and welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe, and joining me here in the newsroom of the Washington Post, LaVar Arrington. Fresh off a, what were you doing yesterday?
I don't know.
Hard Hits blogger, and today our favorite blogger, LaVar Arrington.
Our man LaVar, office linebacker here on Valentine's Day. Former Hard Hits blogger and host of 106.7, The Fan, LaVar Arrington, Chad Dukes show. What's painful?
Former Hard Hits guy.
That is what happens when you repeatedly stretch a ligament out.
Are the Wizards a playoff team next year?
I'm going to have to see it. I'm going to have to be a seeing is believing guy. So I'm going nay on playoffs. I don't think that it's half full or half empty right now. I'm just looking at the glass with water in it.
Bryce Harper. Love Bryce Harper. We'll get to Bryce Harper.
I don't love him.
LaVar, just hang on. We'll get to Bryce.
I think Bryce Harper falls into that new generation of athlete that they don't really care. It's all about how they feel and how they approach what they're going to do. I think that he's a first-year guy. He's got to do it the way that he's going to do it, but you have to be careful you don't run into like a Mike Shanahan situation. I'm trying to think of a way to truly sum up the state of this team, and it's kind of like, who cares? I could care less about if Mike Shanahan is leaking out reports. I could care less if he wants to be here or not. You're going to hold him out for the rest of a season, and you have 3 wins? Are we dumb? Are we dumb? I think if Jay Gruden is smart, he will take the initiative to begin to repair and restore.
I am DC, people. That's why I'm sitting here in the Washington Post, okay? Don't get it twisted. That's true.
So I'll take the first stab at this, LaVar. One of the things that comes to mind when I think back to your time here are some of the conversations we had before the show, before we went to air on with Dan specifically about how many like average Joe White guys it would take to subdue you
then
in
it
a fight.
Into something
we used to do a
totally
tiebreaker, and then we
it turned into how many squirrels.
Squirrels were part of it.
It just how many ants.
There were some very colorful pre-show
Color
conversations,
is the right
which
word.
I will miss. And I would like to personally thank you for resisting the urge to break me in half on the times that I've asked you to be more concise.
Shut up a few times.
And shut up and move along. So thank you.
No
it's been a pleasure.
It's been all mine.
You will be very, very missed around here at the Post Sports Live.
Thank you very much.
Dan or Matt, what's your name, Mike?
We got to hold Dan back because he might start crying. He might start crying. I know this is going to be an emotional moment for Dan.
I had fun doing this with you, LaVar, and we've done a lot of these shows together, and I really did enjoy it and consider you a friend. So that's all.
I'll just say, when I first was working at the radio station with him, he came up to me one day and he said, what do you think of me writing or doing something for the Washington Post? And I go, I think he'd be good. And he goes, really? And he was so giddy. He looked at the Washington Post like probably Woodward and Bernstein did 40, 50 years ago. And for someone of his ilk to hold our institution in the regard that we believe it should be, as a modern day athlete, I don't know, it meant a lot to me. And the fact that he ended up working here and being part of this, even if it was part-time, it was very cool. And I do consider him a friend, too. So thank you, brother.
Thank you.
For now, it's just like we're the farm club, and now he's moving up to the big time.
Oh, hey, L.A., baby.
Congratulations. Go ahead, LaVar. Any final thoughts?
I'm so appreciative of the Washington Post and you guys. I mean, it's been an amazing road. I mean, I've had nothing but fun. I mean, you take a blink, and we've been here for years. We've been doing this for a long time. So, Mike, somebody that I respected even as a player. Dan, not so much, but but having the opportunity to do this show and get to know Dan and Jay Reed and you and so many other people, Vita and obviously Mitch and the rest of the staff. I mean, the staff has been first class. I work on a set in LA and in different places, and this is right. It's done correctly. So I owe a lot of my development to being a part of this, and I do hold the Washington Post and one the highest esteem. It's something that I pride myself in leading off. When I say what I've been able to accomplish, I actually say I wrote. And you could say blog, I could care less. I wrote for the Washington Post.
Half the writers in the newsroom do it. It's all digital now.
And so I actually say that before I even give any type of athletic accomplishments, because I feel as though being able to write and work for the Washington Post and work for the Post for an extended amount of time was quite an accomplishment from where I came from. So I'm just thankful for having the opportunity. And hey, listen, I don't believe in doors staying shut for forever. In some cases, you just never know. I might go out here and become something different, and the Washington Post may have an opening and give me a better situation at some point.
That's your right there.
Yeah, here you go. You want to host?
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's
so
a good
know.
thing.
You never know.
All right.
Thank you,
Well, you'll be ready. You'll be ready. Don't be a stranger with Maryland joining the Big Ten. I have a lot of conversations about
we will
Penn State.
We will do some interviews.
Penn State
there you
rivalry.
go.
All right. For Dan Steinberg, Mike Wise, LaVar Arrington, wish you the best at NFL Network.
Appreciate it.
Kick ass in California. This is Jonathan Forsythe. Thanks for joining us on Post Sports Live. We'll still have a show next week, just without our office linebacker. See you then.